Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another uLaw webinar. I welcome everyone who's joined us from different parts of Canada for our webinar with the topic uLaw in a multi-user firm. Okay, so today's webinar has not been accredited for any CPD credits. So I'm just letting you know up front that today's webinar is going to be one of those power-packed sessions where we're going to use more of the uLaw product to demonstrate what are the core features or key features that we've built into the product that allows for a multi-user legal firm to collaborate both on a file or on their business, and how we allow you to accomplish that. Okay, so again, reiterating that today's webinar is not accredited for CPD credits, but it's going to be a session where we're going to be able to demonstrate a lot of the features, the new features and functionalities that truly highlight the multi-user environment or collaborative environment that we've built into the product today. Okay, I kindly request you to use your phone lines. I've provided the number on the chat window for those who are using the computer to listen in. We've heard that the phone lines, the quality of the audio is slightly better. As always, kindly do use the chat window for any questions that you may have during any time of the session. The support staff from uLaw would be happy to answer those questions for you. And this particular session will be recorded and available for you to consume as early as Monday, Tuesday next week. Okay? So let me just move along to, all right, so like any other webinar of uLawPractice, today's webinar has a very clear-cut agenda, and we're going to use this agenda to help us go through today's presentation as I walk you through a demonstration of a multi-user ecosystem, something very new to the uLaw product. Okay? uLaw as a company, we've evolved to be a legal accounting practice management software company. And one of our critical mission statement is to enable legal practitioners across Canada to be audit ready from day one, to be compliant with Law Society's guidelines across all provinces, and also provide you with an easy way to access the information you need to make informed decisions, smart decisions about your business, give you that extra hands on deck to help you manage your business and the numbers behind your business as well. So we're also a business accounting software. But when we first started, our goal was to, and it still is in many ways, to work with solo practitioners and small law firms. And as we saw the evolution of small law firms in Canada, we understood that a lot of legal professionals began to collaborate with other friends and colleagues where they formed businesses together. They would either be individual lawyers or paralegals working on their own files, but then would use common space, would grow the firm to handle various different silos of practice where multiple colleagues or friends would bring those individual niche expertise into that firm. And that's where the need for uLaw to grow as a product to manage that multi-user ecosystem began. That's where we realized that there's more to it than just an individual working. It works still great for individuals or solo practitioners, but as the next level of evolution for your own sanity as well, we've evolved the product to handle in multiple individuals across the company to collaborate and be part of that firm. Okay, so we're going to today talk about how uLaw in that multi-user firm situation provides restrictions and permissions for individuals and different roles that we allow you to collaborate under, okay, such as assistants. You could have co-workers that are other colleagues that add to the mixed trust or pool trust. There could be an accountant that you, or a bookkeeper that you may be using from a previous life, and you may want them to look at certain numbers before you file taxes. So there's different types of users that today uLaw allows you to have users under. okay? And then we'll talk about one of the very key features, which is how do you now allow these different individuals or user roles, if you will, to collaborate within a particular file or matter and maybe dock it together, okay? So let's assume there's a file where you're working on a client and it really needs multiple legal professionals to contribute individually, but all towards that one file. So there's, a lawyer who does the, or maybe there's an assistant who does the initial screening before client intake. There is the primary lawyer or the owner of the firm who does the initial meeting, and then maybe another lawyer or a paralegal may actually do a court visit, all of them contributing towards docketing for that one file, okay? So we'll talk about how we allow you to do that today, and then how that evolves and reflects in the invoices that you generate to your clients. And you have obviously the flexibility of showcasing the multiple individuals that have contributed to a file if you choose to. I mean, if you don't have that need, obviously it's just a simple setting that I'll walk you through as well. But if you are a multi-firm situation, then we certainly would allow you to reflect that information on those invoices. Especially if you're dealing with legal aid, that's an important component of a legal aid, that if you have multiple individuals working on a file, that you basically do, reflect that information on the invoices, okay? And last but not the least, we'll look at how, as the owner of the firm or someone who's in control of the business or needs to understand numbers, you can now generate timesheets, and timesheets that also talk about not just time but also the revenue that individual users or employees or collaborators in the company bring in. And many of our clients today use those reports to even pay their employees or get a better appreciation for how they use their time, okay? And we'll try and take a simple use case of how you can also collaborate at a business level. So I've got a quick example of how you could, multiple individuals could throw in their expenses into, have their assistants deal with their expenses as they quickly take a snapshot of those expenses. Okay, so we'll leave some time for that final demonstration, but the key context of today's webinar is to highlight that multi-user ecosystem and talk about especially how you can allow multiple users to dock it and collaborate within a file, okay? And that's pretty much it from a slide share that I wanted to show you today. I wanted to just set the context within the quick first 5 minutes so that we can jump into a demonstration of the product that would take each of those agenda points and showcase it to you so that you better understand and appreciate how you can accomplish this within today's webinar, okay? So for those who are just joining us today and want to learn more about the company, we are a Canadian legal accounting and practice management software based out of Ottawa, Canada, and please do visit our website, uLawPractice.com. We do offer a no obligation, free 30-day trial, and we'd love for you to explore the product, and we will do our best to put our best foot forward and hopefully be part of your legal journey, okay? So let me just quickly jump out of my slide share. And I'm going to set some context before I start demonstrating today's demo. So if you can just join me in understanding, I've got a few different roles that I want to showcase to you. So let's assume I always use Mr. Roger Moore as my, let me quickly jump in, practitioner, a solo practitioner who for all this while has been doing all his files on his own. But over the evolution of time, he's grown to let's say a law firm where Now he employs an assistant who manages initial client intake. He also has another co-worker lawyer who works with him. So Roger Moore is still the owner of this law firm, but now he's employed an assistant, and he's also employed a co-worker or another lawyer to work with him in this particular firm. So that's the context that I want to set in. One of the first things that I'll showcase is that within the contacts, so each and every component within uLaw has its own significance, right? And one of the groups in contacts that we use is called the co-workers group. Right here we have 4 co-workers that we've created. And if you look at Amrit Singh, he is one of the co-workers, the solicitor and barrister. He's another lawyer, but he's also a co-worker in this firm, meaning he's contributing to the mixed pool trust, but he has his own files. He may also collaborate with Roger on other files together as well. Okay, and then we've got Janet, Sandra, and Stacy. Let's assume Sandra Bullock is the legal assistant for the purposes of today's demonstration. And let's take that use case, and I'm going to try and walk you through the permission model. I'm going to try and walk you through a collaborator model. Okay. Now, as the owner of the firm, Mr. Roger, in his settings, has this new tab called the permission. So the permission is really how he controls the user access to the uLawPractice file for his firm. Okay, so as you can see, we have predominantly 3 different roles. You have an assistant role, a co-worker role, and an accountant role. So there's 3 roles, and we're looking to expand these roles in the future as well. It's definitely in our roadmap to have more granular roles or user roles, but today we pretty much have an umbrella bucket of these 3 different roles: assistant, we have a core worker, and an accountant. Okay, so I've got different logins for those individuals. Okay, and you can see here that Roger can set permissions for what he wants his assistant or everybody who's under that assistant umbrella can see or cannot access within his firm. For example, let's do this. So we're going to say these. Let's just assume, for purposes of the demonstration, where you can see here the assistant access to analytics has been turned off. Okay, I'm going to log in. I've already logged in as the assistant here. If you like, let me just show you how that's done. I'm just going to use uLawPractice.assistant, and that's just a simple login that we've created for the purposes of today's demo. In real life, obviously, this would be an individual's name, and we would help set that up as well. But just for today's demo, we've created it as an assistant so you can appreciate it. So one of the first permission models, as I mentioned, Roger has not provided access to anyone who's an assistant or is playing the role of an assistant. They don't have access to the analytics, so it's set to no. Yeah. So once I load up my uLaw account, let's say I'm his, I've created Sandra, who's the assistant in this particular law firm. Sandra logs in. She has obviously access to many of the other modules within the product, so she could jump into contacts, do an initial screening. She can do client intake, so she has access to all these particular features of uLaw. Okay, so I'm just going to click on contacts, so you can see she has access to that. So when I click on analytics, which is the one where Roger has set the permission with no access, we're going to quickly see what that reflects. So basically it tells Sandra that a permission has been denied. Please contact your admin or contact your owner of the firm to change and grant permission. Okay, so that's one of the first things I want to establish, is that you, as the owner, primary owner of the firm, as you evolve with uLaw, have control, full right permissions to provide those different users that you've added into the firm. Okay, so all you got to do is say, yeah, I want to provide anyone with the assistant role access to the analytics as well. Okay? Let's just say that it's a very democratic firm that everyone has access to all the information. All that's required is either for Sandra to sign out and sign back in, okay? Or she could just refresh her browser, and that's all that's required. So let's just say I dial back in. I'm going to say I'm not a robot because that's a new security feature with CAPTCHA. I log in. I'm not going to say passwords for now. Log back in. What you should expect, obviously, is that Sandra now has access to the analytics capabilities of the product. Okay? That's a very simple example of how you can restrict each and every screen. So we have two levels of permissions. So one is at a feature level. So we call each of these sidebar logos, dashboard contacts as individual features. So you've got about 7. So now when I click on analytics, there you go. I have access to generating those analytics. So one is we have permission at the feature level, but we've also got a granular where you have access under accounts. If you see that you don't see a document generation button, typically you should be able to generate documents, but the assistant login here does not see that, okay? Whereas, again, if you log in into Matters, you see you don't have access to generating any documents. And that's another granular permission model that we've set up. So as Roger Moore, I could basically say, assistant access to documents and reports, it's set to no. Assistant access to any reports, set to no. Okay? Those are the two permission models. I'm going to say yes to all. So you can see not only at a feature level, but maybe you want access to go create a matter. For example, they could still go create a matter if that's all that you're providing permission for an assistant to do. But you don't want them to generate invoices, for example. You don't want them to generate any other document. All they can do is do a client intake, generate create a new matter, and maybe put a docket. Maybe that's what you provide them restriction to. Maybe you allow them to generate documents. Maybe you don't want them to generate reports. So you can go at that granular level as well. Okay? Hopefully that, I don't want to overemphasize the nature of this feature, but the bottom line is through the permission model, you as the owner of the firm, as you expand into a multi-user environment, have full control over permissions and what access to the uLaw data and screens that you want to provide your extended enterprise. Okay? You have that at a feature level, dashboard analytics, or you can even go granular from documents and reports perspective as well. And the same thing applies for the other two user roles, so for coworker as well as the accountant. These are 3 different permission models, permission roles, and there are 2 granular permission models that we have for them to access. Okay, so that's the first thing that I wanted to showcase to you. So now if I go into accounts, there you see the document generation is back. So the assistant can now go generate all those documents, and the same thing would apply to matters as well. Okay? Okay, so let's say we've set that context. So you as the owner of the firm can appreciate and set the permissions. Fantastic. Now let's take a simple use case, and I'll walk you through this use case. So let's say in a typical firm where there are multiple individuals working together, and there's a client, and let's create a fake client who walks into the firm. Let's assume that both the lawyers are actually traveling and they're not in the office, and the person in the office is the front office or the assistant, who's Sandra Bullock in this case. And now Sandra obviously has her, so go to Firefox, so that's Sandra. Typically this would say Sandra or whatever you want to create as the name for. So let's assume Sandra steps in and she invites this new prospect, and then one of the first things that she does is do a client intake. Okay? So let's take that particular example, because you've provided permission for her to access contacts, you could go ahead and create clients. So let's say this is one Mr. Mungle did. Okay. So she's going to ask Mr. Mungle, how did he get to know about Mr. Roger Moore and his firm? Maybe it's a client referral. You could say referred by Thomas. Okay. And obviously gets a correspondence address. Okay. We'll mark that as a work address. And let's say she also gets a phone number. Okay. And then she goes ahead and saves that client's information. She may actually get the client to provide a driver's license or a passport, may scan that information, may go ahead and actually have the permission from the firm to go ahead and do a conflict screening before she creates the matter. And so let's say at this particular time, the client's willing to either meet the lawyer and do the retainer agreement, or come back or have an initial conversation with the lawyer, Mr. Roger Moore, before he could actually come back into the office to do a retainer. So let's say that's the situation. Mr. Mungle gives his information, or maybe he called in to the firm, and now he's called into the firm. He's given some basic information. Now he wants the lawyer in the firm to contact him back, have a simple conversation before he can decide whether he wants to retain this firm or not. Okay? So Sandra would now give Mr. Roger Moore, let's assume Mr. Roger Moore, a call. And Roger Moore is at the court doing another work. Very pragmatic example. Okay? So what I'm going to show you now is I'm logged in. I'm going to share my pass my presenter role to Mr. I'm logged in now using my app. So uLaw has an app, and I'm basically going to share my screen right now. So let's assume Mr. Roger Moore is here. He's going to dial in into his uLaw app, and there's a new search feature which allows Roger, after speaking with Sandra, he recognizes that it is Mr. Mungle, so he's able to go quickly search for Mr. Mungle's information. Okay? And let's just assume that he gives Mungle a call right from here. So he has a phone number right here, if you can notice. That's 1844. I'm going to go ahead and call that person straight out of my phone. So let's assume Mr. Roger Moore is giving a phone number. Again, this is our 1-800 number, so I'm just going to go ahead. Let's say he has had that conversation. He's talking to Mr. Mungle right now. He says, hey, our firm is fantastic. We can certainly represent you in that small claims matter or family matter, whatever it is. He says, all right, I will have all the papers ready. Why don't you come back tomorrow, and then we'll get this sorted. Okay, so he's had that conversation. Now he's going to call back to Sandra and say, go ahead and create a file. So let me go back to situation where I've got just going back and forth between an app situation to the main user page. So let's assume Mr. Mungle comes back the next day. Sandra does a conflict screening, creates a matter for Mungle. Okay. And let's just say this is a slip and fall. And I'm going to say this is a small claims matter. And the assistant does the initial setup of the file. Okay? In a solo practitioner world, all this is done by yourself. I'm just trying to paint the picture about a multi-user story so that you can appreciate how the product has evolved as well to meet those needs of that firm. So I could say initial client intake. I'll say initial intake and conflict screening. Okay, so let's say this is the three things that Sandra had done. And what Sandra would do is just to reflect that it was herself that actually did it, would first associate herself, because you may have multiple assistants working in the firm. Not all of them would, be in that firm at that time. Sometimes some certain firms have a situation where there are multiple assistants at different time zones working for the firm, right? So she would associate herself as an assistant. She would also associate Mr. Amrit Singh, knowing that his expertise would be required, but he's going to be charging $100. And let's say Mr. Roger Moore, for this matter, would be charging $200. Okay, so she kind of quickly sets that up, and that's all there is. So goes to rate, sets herself up. Her rate is $75 for the work that she does. Mr. Amrit, who's the co-worker that I'm going to talk about shortly, she set him up to be at $100 as L2, and if there are other assistants, then they would show up as well. The same thing is reflected in the co-workers. So basically, you have Mr. Amrit. If I were to quickly choose my co-workers group here, you can see for Amrit Singh, he's the L2, and you've got Sandra Bullock, who's the legal assistant. So you mentioned that within the profession of the contact itself. Okay. Now, let's say the first meeting, if in that use case that we had, Sandra was the one who did it. What she's going to do is she's going to use the toggle that we use to toggle that entire docket into any condition that you want. And she's going to say this was docketed by A1, which in this case reflects to Sandra Bullock. And let's say she's done, just for purposes of this demo, I know it doesn't make sense, she spent 30 minutes, but she's billing the client an hour for that initial client intake. Okay? Now, let me give you a great example of how, like how I showed you on the phone. Let me switch the presenter role back to my phone so you can appreciate that. So Mr. Roger Moore is on his app, on his uLaw app, and he is basically looking to create this new, going into this matter. Okay. There you go. So he's going to be able to go into this matter. And there's a new feature in the uLaw app that also allows you to search for matter. So you could say Mungal, because you know the name. There's Mr. Mungal Din. I choose him. You can see right away that the initial docket has been presented. For those who are not able to see, it's right here. I can now import that phone conversation that I had as a telephone conversation and really talk about how many minutes I spent on it. So I could say I spent okay, so I'll say 20 minutes on it, or 24. I'll round it to, and you can add descriptions, basically saying initial phone conversation, with Mongo. Okay, I just add that docket. So two different users in two different devices have now been able to collaborate on that same docket. And this is the last time I'm going to do this, so bear with me. And now when I log in as Sandra and go back into that matter, Sandra's going to notice that it was her initial client intake docket that she had billed at her rate. And then there's this new telephone conversation for 24 minutes that's come in from Mr. Roger at his rate. Okay, so when there's no specific specification really of which user profile I'm using, by default it's the L1. The black is really the L1, the green, and you can set those colors right under the settings as well. Okay, so now you've got two dockets, one by Mr. Roger Moore for the 24 minutes conversation, and 1 hour by the assistant. And if you notice the actual billable time, it's basically taken the 1 hour at the $75 rate, and it's taken the 24 minutes at a $200 rate to give you that collaborative feel. Now let's go and take this a bit further. Let's bring in Mr. Amrit Singh, and I'm going to log in. So let's say this is Amrit Singh. So you can see this is a co-worker. Again, keep in mind that these labels can be renamed. Just for the purposes of today's demo, I've logged in as a co-worker. And so let's say Sandra, again, gives Amrit a call and says, hey, we would like for you to collaborate and work on this file together. He's going to be able to go into his matter. Okay, and this is him logging in a very separate environment, and I'm using Sandra was using a Firefox, and Mr. Amrit is using his Chrome browser and searches up Mongo. He would quickly identify that there's now two dockets, one by Mr. Roger and one by Sandra. Okay, so now let's say he's going to add an event, and he's going to call it court visit or attend court. So let's say he attended the court. He's going to use the same toggle and now use the legal counsel rate of L2. And let's just make this interesting, and I'll say he spent 2 hours on it. And basically says attend court, lawyer, time, spent. Okay, and let's also make the billable time as 2 hours. So everyone's billed exactly what they've asked for. Let's just change that as well. So 24 minutes spent, 24 minutes billed by Roger Moore. 1 hour spent, 1 hour billed by Sandra, the assistant. 2 hours spent and 2 hours billed by the legal counsel 2, or the co-worker in this case, because of the association here. Amrit Singh is the L2. Okay. Now Amrit is going to docket that 2 hours at his rate. And if you notice, it's 175. Now his rate is at $100 for this particular matter. And you're going to see the overall bill is going to increase by 100 plus tax for the projected balance. Okay? Now comes the interesting part. So let's say at the end of the day, Roger, or he gives permission to Sandra to go ahead and generate the invoice. A very important component before I generate the invoice is in the settings and the matter tab. Now this is where you as the owner can decide either at a matter level or at the overall firm level, 2 very new features to showcase in invoices. So if you look at our presentation, we spoke about how do I first collaborate in docketing together, and that's what we've tried to take a quick overview of the last 15 minutes where, right, Roger Moore did his docket using his app, Sandra did the initial client intake using a Firefox browser, and then now Amrit Singh, who's the lawyer, the co-worker lawyer, docketed 2 hours of his time attending court. So we've kind of walked through how you could collaborate on a single file for Mr. Mangal Din. Now comes the question of the firm's policy of whether you want to represent each of those individual items. So do you want Mangal to know who worked on what at what rate? Okay? So there's 2 new, how do I show this? Show docket done by name. So do you want the end user, the client, to know who did what by name? And do you also want them to know the designation that they have within the firm? Okay, the designation was the solicitor, barrister, or legal assistant that was in your contacts. Okay, so let's by default set it to no, and let me generate a preview. Go ahead and document generation, invoice, and let me do a pre-bill. And I will do it from Mr. Roger Moore's office, or I could have technically done this as Amrit Singh, or I could have done this as the assistant Sandra Bullock. Okay, and I'll use the uLaw theme just to keep it simple. And let me do a preview. A preview where the document showcases. Okay, let me do it from here. Okay, let me go ahead and do a pre-bill. I'll get rid of the legal aid. I'll just say preview. So first, as you can notice, when the invoice does come up, so this is a pre-bill. Basically tells you the work done. So telephone conversation for 24 minutes, initial phone conversation. So that's the description. And it talks about the unit cost per hour. It doesn't tell who is charging you that or not. So the client just knows that, all right, that was at $200 an hour, and for 24 minutes, I've got 80. And again, you can change this, right? I mean, you can have this to be, you can say whether you want to show the unit cost or not. You can make it a flat rate if you'd like. But then the initial intake was $75, and then the attend court. But this doesn't give you the complete picture. So let's now go back and go into our settings. And let's just start by showing the docket done by the name. So Roger Moore, Sandra Bullock, as well as Amrit Singh. So let's say you want to showcase those names. It's just a simple setting that you turn on. Okay, so I've just said yes to that. And let me just go back and regenerate that same pre-bill now, and you would kind of see a difference in the overall representation. Okay? I'm just going to say document generation, invoice, pre-bill. Let me just in the same theme, just to compare apples to apples. And what this showcases, if you can actually see, this is a pre-bill, but that's one of the reasons why you can't see it. It says rendered by Mr. Roger Moore, rendered by Sandra Bullock, right? And rendered by Amrit Singh. If I did an actual bill, you probably appreciate the color better, because I'll get rid of that real quick. So I hope you got that idea. And now, as a firm, you can go one step further. If you want to provide complete clarity to your client, you can also say, I want them to also know the designation. I want to know that this is Sandra Book, a legal assistant who did it. This is another barrister solicitor, Mr. Amrit Singh, who did it, and Roger Moore, who's the owner of the firm, is also a solicitor barrister, right? So you can now provide a designation to the individuals as well. And this is the third variety of how you can showcase that. And this time, I'm not going to generate a pre-bill. Let me just go ahead and generate a bill so you can appreciate some next steps. I'll go ahead and I will generate a complete invoice. I'll skip the preview, and I'll just go ahead and generate the invoice. Okay? As we wait for that bill to be ready, again, just to recap, we looked at permission model, how you as the owner of the firm can provide your extended enterprise with a permission model, both for the feature set as well as granularly at the report level as well. And we talked about, and we looked at how 3 different users, an assistant, the owner, as well as the coworker lawyer, collaborated on this one file with their individual dockets, individual times, and we also looked at a multi-device, multi-browser situation where they all worked on the same file. Okay, and you can see the response was almost instantaneous. Now, if you kind of review this invoice, it's pretty clear, right? It looks good. It tells Mr. Mangal that here's the telephone conversation that you had with Mr. Roger Moore, the lawyer. Here's the initial client intake that was rendered by Sandra Book, the legal assistant, and her rate was $75. And she spent an hour with you, and that's what we're charging. And here is Mr. Amrit Singh, and you can change this to lawyer. That's just the name provided in the definition. Okay, and that's my total, and that's the total owing, $401.15. Okay, so it's as simple as that. The 3 different individuals have collaborated on this one file. Okay. Now let's look at the next step. So let's not even go into getting paid. Obviously, we'll do that. The assistant would maybe make them a call and get the credit card information to get paid. This may be a retainer situation. But what I want to focus on the next 10 minutes is now as Mr. Roger Moore. So let's assume you have this situation with multiple files, right? You have a legal assistant who is contributing. You as the primary legal professional are contributing to a file, and you have other colleagues in the company contributing to a file. And let's say this goes on every month, every day. You as the owner want to have a better feel, better control about who's contributing to my firm. Okay, I've hired these employees, I've hired some extra help, extra hands on deck, but I really want to understand how are they performing for me as my firm. So with that, again, you can basically review calendar by color. So under settings, under calendar, you can give a color code to each of your users. So you could say, for Sandra, it's red. For Amrit, it's lacy violet, whatever that is. And for yourself, it's hot blue. So basically, when you look at a calendar, that was the 8:30 done by Sandra. Here's the client intake that was done by herself. Attend court for 2 hours was done by Amrit, and the telephone conversation was done by yourself at the blue color. So the color coding also helps to give a better perspective of the time used. Okay? But what I'd like to focus the attention is under calendar, we have very, very important time-based reports. These are very critical to your firm, especially in a multi-user environment. Okay? First and foremost is your timesheet. So let's just focus on today. I may have worked as a demonstration for other clients, but I'm sure we can appreciate the 1 hour, 24 minutes, and the 2 hours. Okay. So here is that 24 minutes that happened today by Mr. Roger Moore. Sandra Bullock did the client intake for 1 hour. It was planned for 1 hour, billed for 1 hour, and then for the Mangaldin file, slip and fall, Amrit Singh had planned 2 hours, and he billed the 2 hours. Okay. You can also break it down by individuals or by clients. You've got 3 clients today, and that's the amount of time that was billed for these clients. And if you notice, for Mangaldin, it's 3 hours and 24 minutes, which makes sense because there's 1 hour from Sandra, it's about 24 minutes from Roger, and 2 hours from Amrit, right? We also give you a breakdown by individuals. So let's assume these are the 3 individuals in the firm, starting with the owner, Mr. Roger Moore. Today only, he's contributed 5 hours of billable time. Sandra had 1 hour today, and Amrit for 7 hours. So, that's the level of information that you can actually get right away, both from a individual in the company service level as well as a client perspective. But we go one step further. So you can actually go in and say, I want to understand, you can group it by employees. So the same timesheet can be grouped by an employee. Just a very different representation of the same data. So it tells you by individuals the time spent. So it tells you by Amrit Singh, grouped by him, this is the total work that he's put in today, right? So he's got 7 hours. And you got Sandra at 1 hour. Okay, so Amrit Singh has a total of 7 hours. Roger Moore has a total of 5 hours, and that's how it's spread out. And Sandra has a total of 1 hour, and that's the total spread. Okay? If you want to know the dollars that that particular time spent has evolved, because sometimes you may spend 7 hours, but maybe it's a pro bono docket, so you may not actually have money bringing into the business. But if you've actually billed him that 4 hours, you can even generate a revenue by employee. Again, I'll do it for today. This gives Roger Moore, the owner of the firm, a fantastic feel for the contribution made by his employees, right? Or others or colleagues in the firm. So by employee, I know that Amrit Singh, if you look at the timesheet, we only knew the amount of time that he spent. But in the revenue, what you know is Amrit Singh not only spent 7 hours, but that's the total revenue that he brought in. Okay? Roger Moore spent the 5 hours, but what's the total revenue in terms of dollars that he's brought in? And Sandra Bullock, what's the dollars? So for a total of $3,200 that was generated today as revenue, you can basically break it down by Roger Moore, Sandra Bullock, and Amrit Singh, right? So the 3,205 is basically broken down into these 3 individuals. You can see Amrit Singh is obviously a top performer for today. It can't get more meaningful and more clear in terms of Roger Moore's perspective of who the contributors are, how someone's worked on a client. Okay? So all of that is under the calendar reports, and you can obviously do a client service summary. You could do, basically tells you by client how much of money was spent. Okay? So the same 3,200 would now be split by client. So out of the 3,200, which client contributed most of the revenue, right? That's the whole point. Okay? But one of my most important reports would be the revenue by employee. Basically tells you in one single snapshot out of the total 3,200 that was generated today, because I'm done this entire report for the day. That's the spread of the revenue. Also tells you the time. Tells you the estimated hours and all the billable hours as well. Okay? Fantastic. So we looked at how you could collaborate together in a particular matter, have different permission rules across the firm, generate invoices that reflect the individuals that were involved in the docketing of that invoice. And then we looked at the different reports that you as a owner of the firm can generate that gives you a clear indication of the contributions of the different individuals or the co-workers in the company. Now let's look at some other pretty cool ways in which you can technically collaborate within a firm. Okay, and then uLaw gives you that opportunity. Let's assume there are expenses, right? Now, in some firms, you may have an accountant. In some firms, the assistant themselves may be doing all of this work. Because we already have logged in as Sandra here, let's just assume Sandra's helping with the expenses. So let's say, Roger is in a totally different place. He's having a coffee with a client. And as you know, Mr. Amrit was at court, and he's just returning, and both of them had expenses today. Okay? Because everyone contributes to the firm, right? And expenses are incurred by individuals in the firm too. Now, what these individuals can actually do is, we allow you to connect your accounting information with, a third-party cloud storage system, okay, such as Google Drive. So in this particular example, I'm going to use the example where the firm has all these set up by month. So uLaw would, once you connect with Google Drive, uLaw would already set up these default folders for you. So for each year, you can divide it up by the different months in the year. And we would always show the most current month, and that's a setting. You can also show other months as well. But let's say for the month of October, you can see there are no expenses, there are no receipts in it yet. Okay, so let me take you through a quick example. And I'm going to toggle this one more time. Now I'm here in my drive on my phone, so I'm sure you can appreciate this is the phone, and I'm basically looking to scan a receipt. Okay, so I'm basically just taking a picture right from my desk. Oops, sorry. Let me take a quick snapshot of that. I'm going to say coffee with client. And let's assume you have a code to put in the actual dollars with the taxes included. And I'm going to go ahead. And Roger Moore just uploaded that receipt right away into the October month. Okay? And what the assistant can do now, so let's say you have Roger Moore doing that, the assistant behind the scene can basically go in and actually provide more information to it. So she can go into Google Drive and add a description. Roger, right? And what uLaw would do is if you go into the accounts, it has all of that under the accounting documentation. If you go under there, it connects to the same Google Drive account. And shows you the copy with client. You can open it, and it would also show you the bill, right? So this is another way of collaborating at a business level. And you can actually then put this as a bookkeeping task. So here's the 1283 that for a coffee, right? So you can now lead this to her actually doing an expense. Office expenses. And this could be meals. And we know the total because, he helped you with putting that right on the receipt of 1283. We automatically calculate the pre-tax and the tax, and paid to Second Cup. And again, you can figure out, you can ask him, or you can know right from the receipt whether he used the business credit card. Maybe he did. And one of the things that we're trying, again, there is a code right on the receipt as well. And there's an invoice number as well, so you could put both that in. One of the things that we're trying to do as the next level of the evolution of this is actually do a OCR. If you were to scan that, we would actually read the entire receipt and automatically put this expense entry for you. So that's a next roadmap item that we already have. But I could just take what I have right now, enter that information, and I'm pretty much done. Okay? So that's another way in which individuals in the firm can collaborate through uLaw, using the tools that you're very much familiar with, right? So being able to quickly upload a document that automatically reflects in your assistant or your bookkeeper. Now this could be an accountant too. So you could throw in all your receipts into this folder, and all they have to do is read, just have a discipline of putting the total amount of that particular expense, right? And then you're pretty much done. Other levels of collaboration is you can even showcase capital injection. So if, let's say Mr. Amrit and Roger Moore are contributing to the capital, you can basically say capital injection, and you can say it was by Amrit Singh. Okay? Capital for the month of October. Let's say he's contributed $2,000 and it's put into your general account. It was a check that he provided. You're done. Okay? And Roger Moore can generate a report called the Report on Capital for the entire year, and right away understand the collaborative level at a financial investment perspective. Okay? Oh, sorry. I've just got the Firefox folder set to, let me just go into my Chromebook. I'll do the same thing. I'll do my report on capital, right, for the whole year. So collaboration can be at the docket level. It can be at a very rudimentary operational level for a business, but also can be at a very strategic financial investment level. We can also report on the drawings, right? So one is to inject capital, and the other is salary or drawing that you're doing out of it. So you can know by now, Mr. Amrit Singh has contributed close to $5,000. Roger Moore is the primary owner, and he's contributed close to $23,900, right? It tells you by date. And if you notice, Mr. Amrit Singh had the $3,000 and another $5,000, or sorry, another $2,000, adding to the $5,000. So today we did this. Friday, October 12th, capital was another $2,000, right? So it tells right away what that running balance is. Gives you even a question and answer format. What is the total amount of capital invested by Amrit Singh? If you want to know, it's a question. We tell you the answer. Gives you a spread. So out of everyone that's invested in the firm, Amrit Singh's about 10%, and Roger is about 52%. Okay? And you can do the same thing with draws too. So let's say you're doing a draw. Basically, this could be a draw, this could be a salary. So now you say it's a draw for Mr. Amrit Singh. Comes right off my general account, and it's for Mr. Amrit Singh, and we just gave him a check. Okay? You can do the same thing. You can come in and say report on drawings. Yeah, and you can do the same thing on salary too. So salary would be a, right under expense, salary. So you can basically add Mr. Amrit as an employee for whom you need to pay salaries. Okay? Same concept for salaries if you're going to pay salaries to Amrit. And you know from a drawing perspective, Amrit has drawn $2,000. So that's the only, how did he draw the $2,000? He drew the $1,000 earlier in August, and then there was a draw. So this would be a similar report for your salary as well. Okay? Okay. So with that being said, I hopefully today's demonstration was a set of context in how uLaw allows you as an individual or as a sole practitioner to evolve your firm, grow to be a multi-user environment, but still be able to support you with the same level of reporting and compliance that you need to make meaningful decisions for your firm. Okay? Absolutely. So I think one of our clients did mention about a webinar topic for next, which we would certainly entertain, is specifically talking about payroll and how you manage draws and capitals. That's a fantastic idea. I think we'll take that and we'll make sure we come up with a webinar that's solely focused on that. Okay, perfect. We'll certainly appreciate that. And there you go. So you've got, I wanted to show you that it's part of the payroll, right? So what I'd like to do is kind of draw this webinar to an end with that. All I wanted to leave you with taste for uLaw today supports a multi-user environment. It gives you the opportunity to collaborate on a file. It allows individuals to reflect that collaboration through an invoice to their client. It gives the owner of the firm the opportunity to appreciate the collaborative and what that's resulted in terms of both revenue for the firm, also in terms of the time spent by the individuals. Allows you to collaborate at a business operational level where you could have expenses or other documents collaborated through an assistant to the point of where you can also start to talk about drawings, transfer salaries for the different individuals involved. And we will certainly focus on a specific webinar that exclusively focuses on a sole practitioner's journey of managing draws and capital injection and all that good stuff. Okay? So once again, thank everyone for joining us today for this webinar. Please do email us at support@uLawPractice.com for more ideas of the types of webinars that we can generate. Any feedback on today's webinar, things that we can do to improve upon. And today's webinar will be available, recorded and available to you as early as Monday afternoon on our YouTube channel. And again, the topic for today's session that you can search with is the uLaw multi-user firm. Okay. Again, it's not accredited for CPD credits. We hope to apply for it and get it sometime in the future. But again, today's webinar was not accredited for any CPD credits. Thank you, everyone, and have yourself a fantastic weekend. Thank you.